Shabbat Shalom, everybody. It's good to be back from Sukkot. So we're going to do a topical study today, and I'm really excited about that. This is something that has kind of vexed me for a long time, and quite honestly, over the past few months, we've done some teachings, got some pushback on that, but it's also enabled a lot of people to dig into the Word and come to some really great discoveries. We did a teaching called The Synagogue of Satan, and this really exposed that the state of Israel is not biblical Israel, and that was really hard for some people to be able to see that, because there's such a strong push for Christian Zionism and Messianic Zionism. That was really difficult for a lot of people to come to terms with. That the Temple Mount isn't in fact the Temple Mount, it's the Antonia Roman fortress, that the actual Temple Mount was further south in the city of David. And then the one that I think has really been a big stumbling block for so many. And the reason that I bring this up now is because we are in a religious, political time where I just am seeing so much coming to light that as we speak forth the truth, there is pushback. But it needs to come forth in this time when these globalists are really pulling the strings, and so many people are blinded to the scriptures, blinded to historical truth, and they're led by their heartstrings, but it's not actually fact. One of those things, again, that people have been led for so many years is thinking that the Ashkenazi are in fact descendants of Shem. And we've discovered that the Ashkenazi are in fact the synagogue of Satan. They're the descendants of Japheth. They're Turkic Mongols from the Khazarian region that converted to Judaism in the 6th and 7th century. These are the things that we've discovered over the past few months. Those teachings came across in exposing the rotting stick of Israel and the synagogue of Satan that are in our archives. But then if I'm going to go forth and say, well, you know, those that say that they are Jews but are in fact not, but are the synagogue of Satan, and the Ashkenazi are in fact not Jews, they are sons of Gomer, Japheth, they're not even Shemites. Many people have come to me and said, well, who are the real Jews then? Where are the Jews, and what's going on? I mean, we understand that we're Joseph's multicolored coat and we're exiled into the nations. But if Yahweh is gathering the whole house of Israel, all 12 tribes, and the stranger that wants to graft in and join, then where are the tribes and what's going on? So I think it's really important to address this subject because, as I said, 92% of the people that say that they are Jews today are in fact Ashkenazi, sons of Gomer, so thereby are the synagogue of Satan, they who say they are Jews and are not. So who are the real Jews? That's the question that has been posed to me many times over the past months. And there's really two answers to that question. And I'm going to be thorough today because I need to be thorough, because when you speak about this, it's going to upset a lot of people. So we're going to have to take our time in the scripture. So bear with me. Two answers to that question. One, I already addressed in the rotting stick of false restoration and the synagogue of Satan teaching. And that is, who are the true Jews? Well, the Fehalim, which is a term for the so-called Palestinians, the migrant farmers that never left the land of Israel in 70 of the Common Era when the Romans came in. They still were attached to the land. They were called the Fehalim, or what we call today the so-called Palestinians, are in fact the descendants of the poor agricultural Jewish society that stayed in the land, yet they converted to Islam in the 6th and 7th centuries to avoid paying the Islamic jizya tax, because if they had done that, they would have lost their land, and they were attached to the land, so therefore they converted to Islam so that they could stay in the land, working the soil that their forefathers worked. This is recognized in 1918 by the historians David Ben-Gurion, who of course was the future prime minister of Israel back then, and Yitzhak Ben-Zvi, the future president of Israel. Both of them historians recognize this fact. Today, of course, it's buried in your history books. But what about the affluent, regal Jews that weren't connected to the land? Because we've addressed who the poor migrant workers are, the Fehalim. But not everyone in the tribe of Judah was connected to the land. There was a royal, regal class that were merchants that would travel throughout the empire and throughout Judea and throughout the Roman Empire as merchants. These were the regal, affluent Jews that weren't connected to the land, but they were engaged in trade and export. Who are they? And where did these royal nomadic Jews migrate to? That's the question that I want to address today. Because we're going to be looking at and tracking the migration patterns and thus identifying the regal merchant class of the house of Judah, as opposed to who we've already identified, the poor migrant working class, which were the Fehalim, today's Palestinians. I can't stand it when the globalists, the society that tries to enslave us, names us. I'm not a Caucasian, okay? Because a Caucasian is an Asian from the Caucasus Mountain region, the Russian steppes, Caucasian. I'm an Anglo-Saxon, which means a son of Isaac. So when they start to name you and you have to fill out these little boxes and the government hands you out these little and check what race you are, they're the ones telling you who you are. Don't buy it, because I'm not Caucasian. Who's Caucasian? The Ashkenazi Khazars, the Turkic Mongols from the Russian steppes, the Caucasus Mountains. They are Caucasians. We've already explained that. But I'm an Anglo-Saxon. I grew up in England. I'm a son of Isaac. That's what it means. You see, so I'm not going to check those boxes, because the New World Order, the globalists, trying to enslave us. But we serve an Elohim, and the first commandment is, I am Yahweh your Elohim, who delivered you from slavery. That's the key. This whole political system right now is all about slavery. The globalists are slavers. And we, as Israel, have got to understand who our Elohim is. He is the one who delivers his people from slavery. And today you are seeing more slavery by the politicians in this land, and it is truly, truly troubling. And I need to speak out on it, because Yahweh is calling Israel back. He is calling his people back. But you've got to understand that slavery is what keeps you in Egypt. But when you can expose that, you can finally be set free and serve Yahweh, the Elohim of Israel. So we're going to look and track now the migration patterns of the regal merchant class of the house of Judah. Because now we can see that the Caucasians are not pure white races, but a mixture of Asians that lived on the Russian steppes. Asians in the Caucasus Mountains, right? Caucasians. Ashkenazi Khazars. The Ashkenazi, they who say they are Jews and are not, are Caucasians. Khazarian Mongols. That's the truth. And you can check that box. They who say they are Jews and are not. But we're going to look into history. Even when you look at, say, a country like Ethiopia in Africa, and you dig into the history of Menelik I and Menelik II, you'll understand that they were descendants of King Solomon. Menelik meaning from the Melech, from the king, from the king. But what about Egypt? What about Mitzrayim, Egypt? What about Egypt? The pharaohs were black. They weren't white. They were black. Egypt is Mitzrayim, and it means burnt face or black. The ancients referred to their country as Kemet, which has been written in a variety of ways, Kemet, Kemit, Kem, Al-Kem, and it literally means the black land, or the land of the blacks, Mitzrayim. How did Moshe Rabbeinu go undetected for 40 years if he was a Caucasian in the land of the black faces? How did he go undetected for 40 years? How did Joseph's brothers not recognize him in the land of the black faces if he was a white man? Can you tell me that? Noah called his son Ham, in the Hebrew, Ham, Chet Mem Sofit, and it means hot. Kemet and Ham are the same words in the Hebrew, which represented the coloring of the people of Mitzrayim, Egypt. What happens if something stays hot for a long time? It burns and turns black, right? So you start to look at the scriptures and you start to see that we serve an Elohim that delivers people from slavery. And then I get sick and tired of what's been going on in the run-up to these elections. And coming from England, where I see things so different in this country because I come from outside and come into it. And I see all the fermentation. And it really troubles me. But the scripture and historical truth is what will set us free. Amen. But democracy is designed to enslave you. It was invented by the Greeks, and we understand from the scriptures who was sold to the Greeks. Joel speaks about that. In Exodus chapter 2, Shemot chapter 2, verse 19, Moshe was described as a Mitzri, which means a blackface, from the land of the blacks. They didn't say that he was a Mitzri Laban, a Mitzri Laban. What was Laban? Remember Laban? He was an albino. He was white, an albino. And you can see that in Africa today. There are albinos. But he would have been described, if he was white, as a Mitzri Laban. But he wasn't. Which would have meant he was an albino African. But he wasn't. Just like Yaakov's uncle was an albino. You see, the ancient Egyptians were a Kemetic people. They were black. In 1965, the former president of Egypt, Gamal Abdel Nasser, said he couldn't respect the present Jews in Israel because they left Israel black and they came back white because they were Caucasians when they returned, a Turkic Mongol Asians from the Caucasus Mountains, the Russian steppes. Song of Solomon, chapter 1, verse 5. I am black but comely, O ye daughters of Jerusalem, as the tents of Kedar, as the curtains of Solomon. I am black. The Hebrew word there is shachar ha-anya. It literally translates to, I am dark-skinned. Strong's number, and I don't use Strong's numbers very often, but there's going to be pushback. Strong's number 7838, shachar, from Strong's number 7835, dusky. So the word shachar means dusky. And if you look in the concise Oxford English Dictionary in the 10th edition, dusky means darkish in color, euphemistic of a person black and dark-skinned. And in the Old English Dictionary, it says tending to blackness. Song of Solomon's 5, verse 11. His head is as the most pure gold, meaning it's royal, it's regal, he's kingly, he's wearing a crown. His locks are curly and as black as raven. King Solomon, Melech Shlomo, was black. And only blacks have locks, not Caucasians, no matter what Rapunzel or what was the other one? Goldilocks would say, right? Look at Bathsheba in the Hebrew. Bet Tav Shin Bet Ayin, daughter of Sheba. She was the black daughter of Sheba, whose line goes back to Sheba, who was the son of Cush. Cush, who produced the Nilotic black races. Look at this, Bereshit, Genesis chapter 10, verse 6. And the sons of Ham, Cush and Mitzrayim and Put and Canaan, and the sons of Cush, Seba, Havilah, Savta, Ramah, Savtecha, and the sons of Ramah, Sheba and Dedan. And now you're going to say, well, if that's true of Solomon, what about Melech David? What about King David? We know that he was an Anglo because he had ruddy skin, right? Isn't that what the scripture says? Of course. He was Caucasian. No. 1 Samuel 17, verse 42. And when the Philistine looked out and saw David, he disdained him, for he was but a youth, ruddy and of fair countenance. And then you can just move on. But I just don't want to move on. Because when you look at the Hebrew for ruddy is Adomi. Adomi, and it's spelled Aleph, Dalet, Mem, Nun, Yod. And it means reddish black, as in reddish black soil. The reddish black soil connected to the land. And if you don't believe that, Genesis chapter 4, verse 10, Bereshit 4:10, and he said, what have you done? The voice of your brother's dam, blood, cries out to me from the ground. So now here we've got the word play. Dam is blood. Adamah is ground. Adomi is ruddy. We're talking mahogany in color, reddish black. Malcolm X, what was his nickname? Red. Detroit Red. Why? Because he was ruddy in his appearance. He was called Detroit Red. He was mahogany ruddy in appearance. So we have to dig in further, because if King David was an Ashkenazi, white Jew with a reddish complexion, he would have been described as Laban, an albino, but he wasn't. So King David looked more like Malcolm X than he did King Henry VIII, right? But I mean, the DVDs we give our children, right? Oh my goodness, like you were saying, the Israelites have British accents, right? My goodness, it's outrageous. But look at ancient Egypt hieroglyphics, and they are ruddy. The Egyptians have got ruddy black skin, mahogany skin, reddish black complexions. You see, one of King Solomon's sons was later taken to Ethiopia by the Queen of Sheba, whose son had descendants reigning in Ethiopia until when? Until the Ashkenazi, those who say they are Jews and are not, came in and dethroned Haile Selassie in 1974. And that's where we get the Rasta movement, of course, from Ethiopia. Because then, after they dethroned Haile Selassie in 1974, then who did they bring in 1984 to get rid of any of those connected back to biblical Israel? Of course, they bring in Sir Bob Geldof a decade later with his Live Aid migration moving of people for the Ashkenazi communists, and moves everybody from the plateaus into the Live Aid feeding camps underneath Ashkenazi communist control. We already spoke about that earlier at Sukkot. Even the Ethiopian Jews, they're called the Falashas, meaning those that are black. Zephaniah chapter 3 verse 10. From beyond the rivers of Ethiopia, my worshippers, the daughters, my dispersed ones. That's the Queen of Sheba and her sons migrated and dispersed to Ethiopia. Lamentations chapter 4 verse 2. The precious sons of Zion are comparable to fine gold. Verse 8, their visage is blacker than coal. And the concise Oxford English Dictionary, the 10th edition, tells us that visage is a poetic literary of a person's face with reference to the form of their features. A person's facial expression is what? Blacker than coal. You start to connect the language and you start to see. Bereshit, Genesis chapter 9, verse 27. We have got the Ashkenazi sons of Japheth that have infiltrated into the land and are what? They've got the whole world convinced. The whole world convinced that they are sons of Shem. But look what it says in Bereshit chapter 9, verse 27. It actually tells you that Yahweh, who is omnipotent, it is his will because he has actually deceived them into doing this. They are so deceived into doing this. Look at Genesis 9, 27. Elohim will entice and deceive. The Hebrew word there is patah. Patah. He will deceive Japheth, Ashkenaz, the sons of Japheth, and he will dwell, that means Ashkenaz will dwell in the tents of the Shemites. Is that what's happening today? Has he deceived the Ashkenazi so much, those from the Russian steppes, the Caucasians, he's deceived them so much that they're actually dwelling in the place where the real Shemites should dwell? Genesis 9, verse 27. You see, Yahweh is the one that has deceived. He has enticed Japheth. Patah, deceived, enticed. He's deceived and enticed the Ashkenazi Jews into believing that they're the Jews, and they've built the Zionist state of Israel today, which is occupying what? Our whole political platform. You don't know where the money is coming for Hillary Clinton? Where do you think it's coming from the Ashkenazi slavers? That's where all this political money is coming from. And you don't think it's important for us to know this right before the elections, what's going on. Because they're going to try and enslave people even more. And we have to be aware of it. Because what's happened is the Ashkenazi are in fact occupying the tents of Shem, the real Shemites. Shem's not there. It's the Zionist occupiers that are there. Look at Job chapter 12, verse 18. The deceived and the deceiver are Yahweh's. Because some people are going to get all upset because you said, well, Yahweh deceived. He wouldn't deceive. Well, the scripture tells us that he does. Jeremiah chapter 20, verse 7. Yahweh, you deceive me, and I was deceived. Because there's a riddle, right? And we all know the riddle. I love the riddle. I love to do the riddle on my children. Out of the eater came forth meat, and out of the strong came forth sweet, right? What is sweeter than honey and what's stronger than a lion? And we know this from Shimshon, Samson, and Delilah. And she got hold of the riddle, did she not? Deceitfully. And Delilah made Shimshon, Samson, sleep upon her knees. And she called for a man. And she caused him to shave off the 7 locks off his head. And she began to afflict him. And his strength went from him. You see, Samson was the first Rasta. He was a Negro lion fighter, similar to the African Maasai tribe. Judges 14:5 and 16:19. You see, Samson tore a lion apart as he would a young goat. And as a Nazarite, he wore 7 dreadlocks. He was mahogany in body color, just like Malcolm X. And his visage was blacker than coal. He was a Negro. Lamentations 4, 7, and 8. And this is really hard for people to see in Scripture, because predominantly it has been the Caucasians that have been in charge of the Scriptures, right? For millennia. Lamentations 5:10. Our skin was black like an oven. Job 30, verse 30. My skin is black upon me, and my bones are burned with heat. Deuteronomy 28. Deuteronomy 28, verse 68. And Yahweh shall bring you into Mitzrayim, Egypt again, with ships. And the way of which I said to you, you shall see it no more again. And there you shall be sold to your enemies for slaves and female slaves, and no man shall buy you. And that is what happened to the regal class of the house of Judah. And I want to give you a brief history. I won't go into it too much, but I can't just make that statement because there'll be people that will push back. But I want to give you a brief history on slavery. I was just amazed, I got to tell you. I mean, when you come to America and you talk to people about slavery, you can talk to black people about slavery, white people about slavery, and they'll give you all this history on slavery, and it only goes back to the 16th and the 17th century. And you're like, don't they teach you the history of slavery? Why? Ask the bloody question. Why are they only teaching you the history of slavery as far back as the 16th and the 17th century? Why are they only going that far back? Because they don't want you to go farther back than that, because then you'll actually find out the truth. But from the 16th and 17th century, we'll teach you about slavery. You've got to go further back, and you've got to understand and question, why do they do this throughout the whole of America in all the public schools? Why do they only go back as far as the 16th and the 17th century to talk about slavery? We've got to go further back than that. Because Islam designed infernal slavery, and then the Ashkenazi Khazars, those who say they are Jews and are not, are the ones that marketed it, and the regal Negro nomads exiled from the kingdom of Judah were the main recipients of it at the hands of the indigenous black Africans. Because you've got to understand, the regal class of the house of Judah came down from Israel, and they came into the land of the black Africans. And the black Africans resented the regal class of the house of Judah in their land because they had laws, they had customs, they had civility. And they were a regal class of Negro that came down into Africa. And later on, it was the Ashkenazi, the Islamic slave traders as well, that then worked together with the indigenous black Africans to enslave the regal house of Judah. This is what we've got to understand, but you've got to go back before the 16th century to understand the roots of it. So we're going to see, as we dig into this, where this slavery came from, because it was really a system that was very, very well crafted. There was Islamic masters, and there were white Ashkenazi Khazar ship owners. There were the buyers and the sellers. And they're not going to fill you in on all of this, but really you've got a 4-tier system. Number one, you have the Negro nomads that were exiled from the kingdom of Judah. Number two, you had indigenous black African hunters that resented the regal Negro nomads that had come into their territory with their own customs, with their own laws that were different and would not assimilate into their tribal culture. They were their own tribe. They were the regal house of Judah. And number three, you had Islamic trappers that worked with the indigenous black Africans to trap the regal Negro house of Judah. And then you had them sell them to the Ashkenazi ship merchants, along with many Portuguese and British Ashkenazi. You see, it's just like Al-Qaeda today. Or is it ISIS? Or is it ISIL? Or is it IS? I mean, right? Let's just change the name as much as possible to throw you all off so you really don't know what's going on. Let's keep switching the identity to hide the people. Why don't we just keep renaming you? Are you Negro? Oh, no, you're not Negro. No, you're colored. No, you're not colored. You're African American. And this is what they name you. The slavers name you this. Because I know a white guy who grew up in South Africa. And he now lives in America. He is an African American. And more African American than most. Do you see how African American is a misnomer? It's a misnomer. Don't check that box. It's a title given to blacks by democratic slavers. Okay? Let's be real. They want you to check the box, just like they want the Anglo-Saxon to check the Caucasian box. It's not true. So, again, we've got the 4-tier system. Number one, we have the regal Negro nomadic class that are exiled from the kingdom of Judah. They are their own royal tribe in Africa. Then, number two, we have the native black African trackers. They're going to track them down. And number three, we have the Islamic trappers, because between 650 of the Common Era and 1900 of the Common Era, 10 to 20 million people were enslaved by the Arab slave traders. Over 20 million enslaved Africans were delivered through the Trans-Sahara route to the Islamic world. Can you get your head around that? That's not even touching the Americas. Over 80 million more blacks died at the hands of Islam en route. And number four, we have Ashkenazi Khazar Jewish ship merchants. And of course, the Portuguese and the British Ashkenazi were the main buyers. Islam and the Ashkenazi, those that say that they are Jews and are not, were the main sellers. Does that make sense? You've got to dig into this further. We have the 2 tiers right there. We have the Islamic trappers, and then we have the Ashkenazi ship merchants. You see, the Romans, they were globalist slavers. They were globalists then and now. They just migrated to Gaul, Ashkenazi, the sellers, and Britain, the British, of course, the buyers. German Jewry and British Jewry, where have they gone to? Well, they've descended upon Wall Street, upon Hollywood and Washington, D.C., as we see it right now, just to fuel this cataclysmic final war of globalism, which is none other than renaming colonialism. And this is the world that you and I live in. And I'm so sick and tired of these talking heads when it comes to the election time, trying to enslave everybody and cause racial division to try and get the votes. When ultimately, if Israel would just wake up to who's enslaving us, regardless of our skin color, he says what? I am Yahweh your Elohim that delivered you from slavery. We all need to get out from underneath this slavery system, and we need to come together as Joseph's multicolored Melchizedek cloak. But we've got to help identify who are our Jewish brothers and where are our Jewish brothers as the whole house of Israel comes together. Because Islam and the Slavic regions, I mean, where do we get these names? Yugoslavia, of course. Czechoslovakia, Slovakia. These were all regions of bestial slavery that eventually arrived on the African continent. These were areas where Islam invented infernal slavery up in those Slavic regions that then eventually arrived on the African continent. And the black regal Negroes of Judah were the recipients of it. But not only black Judah, but Europeans were even kidnapped by the Arabs and the Ashkenazi traders during the war or peace periods in the medieval times. So, just to recap before we go further, because I don't want you to be confused, because it's of utmost importance. The real Shemites, the Fehalim, the rural farmers, found in the land of Israel at the end of the 19th century and the beginning of the 20th century. What we call today the Palestinian Christians, Palestinians and other anti-Zionist, non-Ashkenazi, Torah-keeping Jews worldwide, just like the Yemenite Jews. And two, the real Shemites, the royal, regal, Negro nomads, exiled from the kingdom of Judah, African Shemites who were taken away in slave ships, Deuteronomy 28, verse 68, by the synagogue of Satan, the Caucasian, white Ashkenazi Jews in the 17th and 18th century. Because Ashkenazi slaving, the history of it is outrageous. Let me read something to you. This is from the Ashkenazi Jew. He's a scholar, Jonathan Shoresh, and he says this. Jewish merchants routinely possessed enormous numbers of slaves temporarily before selling them off. If a slave auction fell on a Jewish holiday, it was postponed due to a lack of buyers and sellers. The Jews of Suriname gave their slave plantations Hebrew names, such as Machanaim, Nachamu, and Goshen. Rabbi Herbert Bloom adds that the slave trade was one of the most important Jewish activities. One of the most important Ashkenazi Jewish activities. In 1694, Jews owned 9,000 regal African nomadic Jews from the house of Judah. In 1694, they owned 9,000 enslaved from the house of Judah. Jewish slaving is confirmed in the Jewish Encyclopedia. But you start talking about it, again, you're digging into historical truth, not sacred history. So why does the American black history exist solely for the past 400 years, beginning in the 17th century? And all you hear about is, well, the transatlantic slave trade. But there's so much more than the transatlantic slave trade. You've got to go further back. I want to quote to you from Babylon to Timbuktu. It's a book by Rudolph R. Windsor. This is page 84. Quote, in the year 65 before the Common Era, the Roman armies under General Pompey captured Jerusalem. In 70 of the Common Era, General Vespasian and his son Titus put an end to the Jewish state with great slaughter. During the period of the military governors of Palestine, many outrages and atrocities were committed against the residue of the people. During the period from Pompey to Julius, it has been estimated that over 1 million Jews fled into Africa, fleeing from Roman persecution and slavery. The slave markets were full of black Jewish slaves. Page 86. Many Jews fled to those parts of northwest Africa known as Tunisia, Algeria, Morocco, and Mauritania. Many other Jews fled to areas where Rome didn't have any jurisdiction. This was the region to the south, the Sahara Desert and the Sudan. You see, in the 1930s, it was an established fact that the regal class of Negro nomads exiled from the kingdom of Judah, that they resided in Songhai, in Mali, in Ghana, in Kenem, in Bornu, in the empire, and within the Onadu forest of Dahomey south of Timbuktu. Communities complete with Aramaic Torah scrolls. On page 90, from Babylon to Timbuktu, it says this: the black Jews had an advantage over the African tribes. Now, this is going to tell you why the native indigenous black Africans worked with Islam to trap the house of Judah and sell them to the Ashkenazi ship owners that were also Portuguese and British Ashkenazi ship owners. And that's the history we want to see. Why did this happen? Page 90. The black Jews had an advantage over the African tribes. They carried their culture. They carried their history, laws, and written records with them. This assured them a constant precedent for the development of a higher social organization. Because of the stability of the black Jewish culture, the Jews were not absorbed into the autochthonous population. In fact, the Jews absorbed some of the native tribes. The Jews made use of every opportunity. They were an industrious and skillful people. In the Jewish Ghanaian states were found kings, princes, governors, generals, secretaries, treasurers, revenue agents, judges, architects, engineers, doctors, historians, language interpreters, mathematicians, jewelers, sculptors, masons, carpenters, painters of art, goldsmiths. There were leather workers, potters, armorers, saddlers, blacksmiths, agriculturists. Do you think the indigenous blacks resented the regal Negro nomadic class of the House of Judah? And do you think they wanted to get paid by Islam? And do you think Islam wanted to get paid by the Ashkenazi Jewish ship merchants? And then you get to your transatlantic slave movement. But don't start at the ships on the west coast of Africa. That's all you're going to get in your democratic American public re-education system. And it just troubles me. Even blacks in this country aren't educated enough to go further back. Do you know how many blacks in America have been lost to Islam? It's outrageous. That's not your tribe. Your tribe is Judah. Muhammad's tribe enslaved you. Why would you convert to Muhammad's tribe when you're of King David's tribe? Don't convert to the tribe that enslaved you and then sold you to Ashkenazi ship merchants. More black Negroes have been lost to Islam in the 20th century than any other believing, Bible-believing group. It's outrageous because they don't want you to know who you really are and what tribe you're from, but you're not from Muhammad's tribe. Never were. Never were. You are a regal Negro class from the royal house of Judah. Amen. It's outrageous to me. Islam is not the black man's religion. It's for those of the Banu Hasham clan of the Quraysh tribe. That's who it's for. It's not from the tribe of Judah. Never was, never will be. It was never the religion of the Negro nomads in Africa because they were exiled from the kingdom of Judah. In Joel chapter 3, verse 6, it talks about these indigenous black Africans in collusion with the Ashkenazi because they were selling the Negro house of Judah to the Greeks. And who did the Greeks? The Greeks, they invented democracy, didn't they? Didn't they just? You see, Africans weren't selling their own people. They were selling a tribe that had encroached upon their land, a higher educated, regal class that had judges, coppersmiths, goldsmiths, and all of this, and they did not assimilate in, and they wanted their stuff, and they wanted to get paid by Islam, and Islam wanted to get paid by the Ashkenazi ship merchants. The Igbo tribe of Africa, they're Jewish. If you were to look, just look at old maps of the African slaving maps. There's an old map of, I think it's Guinea in maybe in the 1720s, 1730s. There's this old map, and it's called a slave coast map. Look on that. It's the slave coast map of Guinea, 1736. And you look on the West Africa map of 1747, and it says right on the West Africa map of 1747, Kingdom of Judah. Right there on the map. On the 1747 Slave Coast map, Desert of Seth. Well, who was Seth? He was Adam and Eve's third son after the death of who? Abel. Desert of Seth, right there on an African slaving map. Luke chapter 3, verse 38, we're talking about the genealogy of Yahusha from the tribe of Judah. Verse 38, the son of Enosh, the son of Seth, the son of Adam, the son of Elohim. But by 1771, the very same map, even with the same cartographer that did the map of 1747, all of a sudden, by 1771, they got wise to it. And there is no kingdom of Judah no more on that map. Disappeared. Same cartographer. Somebody got to him, right? Why would the same cartographer remove the kingdom of Judah from the 1777 map, 1771 map, that was in the 1747 map? Why would he do that? You see, you've got to go further back, because the more we go along this timeline in this day that we have, people don't understand what has gone on in the past. And we are making the very same mistakes as we come to this apocalyptic time of days that we're living in. You see, Israel is that multicolored coat. The true Jews, the Shemites, the Fehalim, the Palestinians, yes, they're lighter skinned. The true Jews, yes, the regal class, they were darker skinned, called Negro. And you can go, well, how come within one tribe we can have multicolored skin tones? Why do we have lighter skin that will work in the land, and then we have darker Negro skin to the house of Judah? That doesn't make sense. Yes, it does. It's called migration and diet. You spend 2,000 years in the Sahara Desert with the vitamin D and the melanin and your diet. Skin color is connected to geographic location. Around the equator, you're going to be darker skinned, and your diet, you're going to be darker skinned. 2,000 years. That's why we have a multicolored coat of the house of Israel. It's fabulous. Melanin, change of diet, more vitamin D. Therefore, you have one tribe, many colors. No one is excluded. You have black African Jewry. You have them. They are the real Shemites. Diet and environment. You see, the Jewish slave trade, its roots are in Bolshevism, and it's in effect in the USA today. It truly is. In Al-Andalus, which was Islamic Spain, that's what it was called back in the day, there was a guild of Ashkenazi Khazar slavers. They were traders in Constantinople, which of course was the capital of the Ottoman Empire. Their guild had about 2,000 members. The slaves were provided by Tartar raids on Slavic villages. Until the late 18th century, the Crimean Khanate maintained a massive slave trade with the Ottoman Empire and the Middle East. They exported about 2 million slaves from Poland, Lithuania, and Russia from the period of 1500 to 1700 of the Common Era. So it's not just the regal class of the House of Judah that were enslaved, but all of those areas around what we call today the Slavic regions, they were, of course, enslaved by Islam. What's the number one slaving country today? What's the number one country that America is economically, politically in bed with? The number one slaving country in the world today, Saudi Arabia. Our whole currency is connected to a slaving country that enslaves women, children, and men from all over the world. And they say nothing. And they're funding our politicians. Funding our politicians. And you don't think this message is relevant? Because people just, let's just stick to, safe and secure. Meanwhile, we're all going down the street to destruction. Do you really think they care what color your skin is? They just want to enslave you all. But they don't want you to really tell the black Negro in America what tribe he's from and who truly enslaves him. Because then guess what? Your voting base is really going to change, is it not? Oh, and we wouldn't want that now, would we? So we'll just give you your history from the 17th century forward. We won't, tie it into the Ashkenazi that have totally... More blacks in America have been lost to the Luciferic Ashkenazi music industry as they promote Beyonce and all of this wicked. It's not regal royal class of the House of Judah. They use and they abuse to enslave people. Until the late 18th century, we see at the height of the American Civil War, who was the Union Army general? Of course, Ulysses Grant. He later became the president. And what did Ulysses Grant do? He expelled the Ashkenazi from all of the southern states. Do you realize that? He expelled all of the Ashkenazi, they who say they are Jews and are not, from the southern states. Why? Why did Ulysses Grant expel the Ashkenazi, they who say they are Jews and are not, from the southern states, the Confederacy, which were under his military control? He totally expelled them. Because the Ashkenazi Khazar Jews were engaged in so much slavery, black market smuggling and swindling activities that it was undermining the Confederacy's war effort. that he expelled them. Because that's what they do. And had done for hundreds of years. And this is the irony of it all. The irony of it all. More black Americans have been lost to the Ashkenazi slavers, their gangster rap, Beyonce's form of Luciferianism, than any other group. Than any other group. What an irony. More African Americans have been lost to Islam in the 20th century. What an irony. More than any other New Testament believing community. Yet Islam is the largest slavers of people of color in the world today. What are we doing? 11.5 to 14 million blacks in America arrived here because they were enslaved by Islam and sold to the Ashkenazi ship merchants that are producing the black culture today, music, movies, to enslave you and to enslave me. And now we come to the politics, and I can't take it. We got what? How many more days do we have? Oh, too many. And this is the biggest irony. And I feel like I am walking around and I'm like, am I the only one? Because it seems real simple to me. I didn't grow up in this country. How come I know this stuff? And you guys grew up here and you don't know this stuff? Or do you know this stuff and you just don't care? Because I didn't study American history. I mean, yeah, we had a spattering of it. But even I knew this. How come you don't know this? More black Americans have been lost to the Democratic Party than any other group in the 20th century. Progressive Democrats in the early 20th century are the ones that implemented sterilization of blacks. Democrats. Post-1970s, Democrats have opened the largest concentration of Planned Parenthood and abortion clinics located where? In the black communities. They're killing Negroes. Killing the regal class of the House of Judah. Republicans abolished slavery. Can we realize that? Democrats supported slavery. Republicans gave blacks the vote. Democrats tried to keep the vote from blacks. Republicans passed the 1964 Civil Rights Act. Who opposed it? Democrats. The first black Republican was elected to the U.S. Senate in 1871. But the first black Democrat was elected to the U.S. Senate in 1999. It only took the Democrats 128 years. Oh my goodness, am I crazy? Because I'm seeing something here. The first 22 blacks elected to the U.S. House were all Republicans. All civil rights legislation from 1865 to 1965 was passed over the objections of Democrats. All civil rights legislation. All civil rights legislation. The Democrats have stood in the way of civil rights for over 100 years. So now you go, well, why are so many black Negro royal class of the House of Judah caught up in voting for those that would try to enslave you? Historically, we'll tell you the Democrats have kept you in slavery because they're still enslaving you and they're still keeping you in slavery. They just rename it, remarket it, remanufacture it, but nothing is new under the sun. Democrats want to enslave you. All civil rights legislation from 1865 to 1965 was passed over the objections of Democrats. Every civil rights initiative for that 100-year period, from the Civil Rights Act of 1866 to the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments, to the Civil Rights Act of 1875, was proposed and passed by Republicans. How do I know this stuff and you guys don't? 100 years of civil rights activism by the Republicans. 100 years of civil rights obstruction, the Democrats. I'm not telling you how to vote. Make your own decisions, people. Dr. King was a Christian and a Republican. Malcolm X was a Republican. The Ku Klux Klan, wake up! It was formed after the Civil War as a military force serving the interests of the Democratic Party, formed to fight against Lincoln's Republican Party that had freed black slaves. And those black slaves were trying to vote. They were trying to be voted into positions of judges, trying to be voted into positions of governmental influence. And more Democrats lynched blacks between 1870 and 1900 than any other group in the whole of the history of this country. Democrats were lynching blacks. Can we be real? This really bothers me. Can you tell? Because we've got all this and I'm like, but you're Democrats. And I know what you're up to. And it is sickening to me. Because we have textual, historic data that proves what you're up to. So how did the regal class of the House of Judah get so caught up in slavery? Because when Lyndon Johnson came to power, blacks who traditionally voted 95% Republican suddenly switched over to Democrat. That is when it happened. Why? Because now the Democrats were promising to give them free stuff. And you know, it's kind of hard to turn down free stuff, isn't it? I'll have those niggers voting Democrat for the next 200 years. I'll have those niggers voting Democrat for the next 200 years. Lyndon B. Johnson confiding in two governors why the passage of his civil rights and welfare legislation was important in 1963. Can you not see who's trying to enslave you? Come on, Matt. It's the difference between house slaves and field slaves. Field slaves, I mean, man, they lived dreadful lives of hard outdoor labor, picking cotton, or even worse. They were always looking for the opportunity to escape, those field slaves. But the house slaves, on the other hand, they get to wear their master's clothes. Well, yeah, I mean, they were hand-me-downs, torn and tattered, but they would receive free meals. They would have the leftover scraps from their master's table. And when the field slaves came in and they would say, let's run, let's get out of here, the house slaves would say, well, run where? Where are we going to get anything better than this? Right? So it is with modern day black liberal Democrats. They're house slaves. House slaves. You vote what you want, but don't vote due to propaganda, color, and ignorance of your own history and what tribe you truly belong to. The reality is, blacks are being pimped like prostitutes by Democrats. Quanal X. You see, too often black believers have espoused a Christianity that ignores their blackness instead of appreciating and speaking to it from history and the scriptures. And that's the problem. Jeremiah chapter 2, verse 14. Is Israel a servant? Is he a homeborn slave? Why was he plundered? Is Israel the servant of Yahweh, as one born in his house? Why then is he treated as with one with no master to protect him? Because if you live outside your master's house, if you live outside his covenant realm, you're going to be enslaved. And that's what's happened. John chapter 8, verse 35. And a slave does not abide in the house forever, but a son, he abides forever. We have to go to the door of Yahusha because we've got to become a bondservant, which makes you a son, because that's the change of status that entitles us to abide forever. And this is it. It's the healing hands that would come and take away that leprosy, because that's what we see, the leprosy of racism and the leprosy of slavery. But within leprosy, you have all the pigmentations of mankind, because first the leper's skin would turn yellow and red, and then black, and then white. And it is only Yahusha that can heal that kind of wound. And that's why I'm telling you this, because it is only Yahusha that can bring the whole house of Israel together. And he's the one that can heal that wound, because he is the Son of the Most High, who said, I am Yahweh, your Elohim, and I'm the Elohim that delivers my people from slavers. Amen. Yes, some of us have less pigmentation than others, but we're all part of that multicolored coat of Israel. It's just that we've got to say, come home, regal Negro class of the house of Judah, into the whole house of Israel, because we can see the deception with the Ashkenazi slavers, they who say they are Jews and are not. Globalism is colonialism, and slavery is still slavery, and the Democrats are the biggest slavers out there, and they're the ones that are pushing this globalistic agenda. It's truly, truly sickening to me to see this globalism and colonialism, because that's the means of exploitation that the black man has suffered at the hands of the Democratic Party and the synagogue of Satan for over 100 years. Your history proves it. The records show. You vote how you want to vote, but don't vote based upon propaganda. Don't vote based upon lies, and don't convert to a form of religion that has enslaved your people for hundreds of years. Islam is not the religion of the black man. Israel, Yahweh, and the tribe of Judah is home for his people to come together as one multicolored coat. And there is no more important time to address this topic.
And they financed the overtaking and conquering of other lands, Australia, the Americas, etc. They are the conquistador families. These are the conquistadors, folks. Pizarro, Cortez, all of these bloody murderers. They brought viruses over across the Atlantic, and they spread viruses to decimate the indigenous people and the original black people, because very, very few black slaves were brought over from Africa to America. The black people, the Washita people, for example, down there in the Louisiana area, they were there since time immemorial. The Moroccan or black African Americans, they are the originals, along with the other indigenous Indian bloodlines, okay? So these people had known all along that the indigenous people were God-fearing people and good people, but they created, as we will see, papal bulls to diminish their status to the status of animal so that they could murder them, okay?
Welcome to 7 Trumpets Prepper, and to this very important and very special video that I'm doing covering who the true biblical Hebrews are. First off, I want to say, as if the warning at the beginning of the video wasn't enough, I want to make sure and reiterate this, that I'm not a racist person, nor am I a person that hates certain individuals. I love all of humanity. I want to see all of humanity making a new kingdom. But nevertheless, there is true Hebrews. There is a true people of the Most High that is scattered throughout the nations of the earth this day. It is not whom that many people believe they are, such as the so-called Jews in the nation-state of Israel that we so see before us right now. I would interject that the true biblical Hebrews are the so-called African-American people that are scattered abroad throughout the world. Now, I will show you through a mass amount of evidence that I'll put up on the screen right here, verses below, and you can do your due diligence and research these things out to see if they be so. It is very important that you understand who the true Hebrews are, because that end-time prophecy, lots of it, surround these individuals. I am a Gentile. I know exactly who I am, but it seems to be the one group of people in the world that have been, by the rest of the world, tried to be dumbed down to the fact or completely erase their history from history, is the African American people, so-called, that are scattered throughout the nations. Now, please understand that not every single black person is a true Hebrew, but it is those that are under the curse of Deuteronomy 28. And you'll be able to tell by the time that I'm done giving you this information in this video who the true Hebrews are, and you may be one of them. So let's begin.
Which are an ancient community of the Israelite exiles. Now this is, for the most part, the general consensus of the largest people in Africa. You do have different groups like the Abu Daya in Uganda who aren't saying they're from the lost tribes, but have joined the people of Israel in the large amounts of numbers. One other location I'd like to, actually before I go into this other location, what's fascinating is, which I speak about, is the transatlantic slave trade. A large percentage of it actually came from Igbo territory. So these Igbo today in Nigeria, who are practicing Jews, numbering the 40 million people with customs and traditions, doing circumcision on the 8th day, were the same exact people brought to the Americas on the transatlantic slave trade. Now, if someone goes to Times Square in New York today, you'll see African Americans dressed in Israelite outfits and yelling at people saying, "You're not the real Jews, we're the real Jews." And so most people saying, "Well, you guys are kooky, you just made this whole thing up, you made up a religion and an identity." Actually, no, they are the blood descendants, most likely, of the people who, from Israel, were brought from Africa to America. So it's very fascinating, but what they need is discernment.
14 verses are talking about God is telling the Israelites, okay, if you keep my commands, this is what I'll do for you. The remaining verses he's telling them, if you don't keep my commands, then this is what will happen. I want to read chapter 28 and verse 68. It says, "And the Lord shall bring thee into Egypt again with ships, by the way whereof I spake unto thee. Thou shalt see it no more again, and there ye shall be sold unto your enemies for bondmen and bondwomen, and no man shall buy you." Now, if you were to get a globe, and you were to look at where the Hebrew Israelites were at, they would not need a ship to get to Egypt. So God was obviously talking about something else. He wasn't talking about the physical land of Egypt. If you look in Exodus 13:3 and Deuteronomy 20 and verse 2, it refers to Egypt as a house of bondage. Now, I want to show you something, and I know everybody has seen this. I saw it a million times, but never paid any attention and never really thought twice about it. But on the back of the dollar bill, there's a pyramid. Now, pyramids are notorious with Egypt. I mean, you say pyramid, that's automatically what you think of is Egypt. So why would the United States of America put a pyramid on the back of their dollar bill? Now, with the word Egypt meaning house of bondage, God was obviously telling the Israelites, hey, I'm going to put you back into slavery. Now, the only race of people that were brought over on ships and sold as bondmen and bondwomen, which are slaves, are the so-called African Americans. That's the term that the white man has given them. Now, like I said before, if after you do this research, which I don't expect you to take anything that I'm telling you, look it up for yourself, do the research. That's what I did. Anytime I was shown a scripture, shown something in a book, I'd look it up myself and do the same thing. And if at the end of that you still can't see it, then I really don't know what else to say. But I want the Black Hebrew Israelites, I'm trying to help to get them woke up and to see the rich heritage that they really have, and what a blessing to be one of God's chosen people. I mean, honestly, I'd give my left foot to be one of God's chosen people.
It's said that once you've been to Africa, the continent is locked in your heart forever. The deep cultural heritage is unmistakable and unchanging. The same can be said for the Middle East, where the people of Israel have passed down their traditions for centuries. But the Lemba are something completely different. This tribe, who live in Zimbabwe and South Africa, claim they are direct descendants of the 12 tribes of Israel. Is it possible they are who they say they are? Astonishingly, the facts support their miraculous oral tradition. When the nation of Israel was formally reestablished in 1948, there was the hope by some that Jews everywhere would become unified once again. After all, God is faithful to his promises to the people of Israel, specifically, I will watch over and care for Israel, and I will bring them back here again. I will build them up and not tear them down. I will plant them and not uproot them. Inspired by this prophetic promise of God, a great pilgrimage began, a journey made by Jews across the globe to mend a fracturing of people that occurred centuries ago. In the 8th century BC, as noted by historians and the Bible in 1 Kings, the Assyrian Empire conquered the northern kingdom of Israel, captured its people, and dispersed them over Assyrian territory. Historians say some were killed, many were blended into other cultures, and others fled. Thus began the tradition of the lost tribes of Israel. Lemba oral tradition passed on through generations says they came from the rabbinical tribe, the Levites. The Lemba say they fled their original home and traveled to Senna in modern-day Yemen, where they became traders and craftsmen until they were forced to escape war or natural disaster. This drove the Lemba across the Red Sea to Africa. During their journey down the African continent, tradition says the Lemba built great cities of stone. This is where science comes in. Archaeologists have verified the existence of these cities. In addition, at these stone city sites, many artifacts have been discovered. These facts are a direct tie to the oral tradition handed down by generations of Lemba. Tribes all over Africa have kept their traditions and customs, but the Lemba are like no other tribe. Strict adherence to Jewish customs have been watched over by Lemba rabbis. Despite losing their original Torah on the journey from Israel to Zimbabwe, all oral teachings and traditions have been maintained. The same kind of oral teaching described in the Old Testament. Dietary laws, including kosher standards and restrictions on meat, are obeyed. Circumcision, Intermarriage has been strictly forbidden to preserve the culture and bloodline. Traditional rabbinical clothing is worn. In a place thousands of miles away from Israel, detached from all Jewish culture, these African Jews who call themselves original Hebrews are committed to their way of life that has been passed down generation to generation. Eventually, DNA testing advanced to the point where the Lemba's claims could be put to the scientific test. University of London scholar Dr. Tudor Parfit swabbed a cross-section of Lemba tribe members, and the results were astounding. The Y chromosome, passed on by many males in the population, proved to contain the Cohen modal haplotype. Among Jews, the CMH marker is most prevalent among Kohanim, or hereditary priests. In addition, this marker is one that only emanates from the Middle East. It is not found in any identifiable African roots. Even more astounding are the following stats. The CMH marker shows up in 50% of the Lemba tested. The same marker shows up only 3 to 5% of the time in the general Jewish population. What could be tradition lost in generations of translation has proven to be quite the opposite. Stories passed on generation after generation, backed up by scientific proof. The Lemba are indeed astonishing. Some claim they are one of the lost tribes of the original Israel. Others say they are another piece needed to assemble the puzzle of Jews scattered all over the world until Israel became a nation again. MJBI learned of the Lemba and has been involved on the ground with them since 2012. At that time, there were no Messianic congregations in amongst the Lemba. Today, just 5 years later, there are now 72 congregations of people meeting on the Sabbath to worship Yeshua, the Messiah, each of them led by some of the 140 MJBI Lemba graduates. God is faithful to his ancient promises. He is regathering his covenant people from the corners of the earth in preparation for the return of the Messiah. MJBI exists to train leaders for this great restoration around the world. Because every revival has influential leaders, and every influential leader has been equipped.
I did a DNA test to try to connect to where I'm actually from. That's something that we, as African Americans, can do now that we couldn't do before. It's not really an excuse for you to say I don't know what ethnic group I come from, because there's a test that you could take to find that out. And so during this process, I went up the branch of my tree to find where I'm from. That we're all searching for things because we're looking for those rites of passages that have been left behind. At the same time, I feel like T'Challa has a tradition, and he has a connection to his ancestors that I long for. Mm-hmm. I long for that, and I feel like Killmonger longs. They're two sides of the same coin. Yeah. But as an African American, you're always gonna feel like, until you make that connection, that there's a disconnect there. What I did is I took a DNA test. So not only, if you just know, the country, that's still the European borders to a certain degree. Gotcha. But if you know that you're Yoruba from Nigeria, then you can now you can pinpoint specific customs and rituals. Got you. That are part of your past. If I know that I'm Jola from Guinea-Bissau, I'm naming all the stuff that I found in mine. That I'm Limba from Sierra Leone. That I'm Limba from Sierra Leone. that I'm limber from Sierra Leone.
In that day.
Okay.
In that day, verse 11, the Lord will again redeem for a second time. First time is Babylonian captivity. The second time, in that day, he will gather the remnant of his people, and he mentions Assyria, Egypt, Pathos, Cush, Elam, Shinar, Hamath, and the islands of the sea. In other words, it's the whole world, but it specifically mentions Ethiopia.
By name.
By name.
Wow.
So this is a set time in history. What is Bayom Hahu? The last days.
We're focusing today on our recent outreach to the ancient Lemba tribe in Zimbabwe, where in just 1 week our clinic treated over 7,000 patients. This is God. We did what we could to bring healing from doctors, but God was also at work healing people miraculously, supernaturally. And here's a few of their stories. Take a look.
We've seen children who couldn't speak, they couldn't hear, they couldn't do anything. I'm shocked. And then they can speak, and they can hear, and they can say their names. Babies that there was this 18-month-old baby that couldn't even stand up or sit up, nothing. And then it had witchcraft bracelets on its wrist. They were cut off, and the baby sat up immediately. I mean, eyes to see with adults. I've seen so many miracles. My heart is just filling up. I'm forever going to be changed over this entire experience. It's the best thing that has ever happened to me.
And the boy was deaf in one ear. And we prayed over him, and God opened his ear. And not only was he joyous, he was excited when he could hear me snap my fingers.
There was this little child, his name was James, and he suffers from asthma. He has no medications. He had maybe had medications once in his life before. He comes to me having difficulty breathing. At that time, one of our co-workers or people working in the prayer tent, his name is Rusty, he was walking by, he saw the child, basically prayed for him right there in front of me, touched him. The kid was completely healed. I mean, there's no medical explanation for that. I've seen people back at home almost die of asthma, and this kid was on his way there. Just suddenly with some prayers and someone touching him, he improved. He was breathing normally. And in the medical field, we don't like to say miracles exist, but I think that was a miracle.
The Lemba tribe, very possibly one of the lost scattered tribes of Israel, are located in remote communities in the heart of Zimbabwe. It is estimated that there may be as many as 400,000 of these ancient descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Oral tradition claims that their ancestors fled the Holy Land over 2,500 years ago. We know from recent DNA testing that many are Kohanim, or descendants of Aaron, the priest, the brother of Moses. They observe many biblical Jewish customs, like the dietary laws, the blowing of shofars, and circumcision. Today they live in abject poverty. Most have never even seen a doctor or dentist. We are bringing needed medical, dental care, and eye care to these precious Jewish people. Most importantly, thousands are hearing and responding to the good news of Yeshua and accepting Him as their Messiah.
Perhaps the Lemba's oral history, handed down over the generations, can help us make a connection to the lost tribes of Israel. The Lemba story goes like this. Thousands of years ago, they were forced out of Israel and settled in a place called Senna, which is believed to be the present-day Yemen. There, they lived as traders and craftsmen until war or natural disaster pushed them across the Red Sea and into Africa. Then began a slow migration south. Along the way, according to the Lemba, they built great stone cities. It's a claim that's fascinating. Himmler is convinced that Lemba ancestors did indeed come from the Middle East. I'm excited to get back to the Lemba to see what they make of this. And I've got the perfect opportunity. It's the Lemba's annual festival, and I've been invited. It's hard to believe that these people, who to the casual observer look just like the other African communities they live among, actually do have DNA passed down from Middle Eastern forefathers. This proves that when it comes to race, looks really can be deceiving. This annual festival is a chance for the oral history and traditional songs of the Lemba to be passed on to the next generation. This song tells the story of the Lemba's journey all the way from Israel to South Africa. Having traced this journey, I'm eager to hear what Samuel Moeti thinks about the DNA evidence.
So the genetic testing actually proved to the doubters what you and your forefathers have been saying for generations. That must be exciting news.
It is.
I'll be honest, I hadn't heard of the Lemba. I knew very little about the people. But having spent time making the journey from Jerusalem down through Zimbabwe, having spent time here at this festival, seeing what your people are all about, I can only sum it up in one word, and it's shalom.
Shalom.
We've seen how science has backed up the claims of the Lemba in the face of years of doubt and prejudice. The archaeological clues, the DNA evidence, and the Lemba's own oral history add up to a very convincing argument. It reminds me that first impressions can often be misleading. It was hard to believe that a tribe of black Africans could be the descendants of ancient Israelites. But that's exactly what they appear to be.
Brothers and sisters, they are there. We are not lost. We are scattered. We are original Hebrew.
By the mid-1990s, I'd become convinced that the Lemba claim that they were of Jewish origin could be true. They'd preserved so many Jewish traditions for so long. But final proof only came when the science of genetics was applied to Lemba oral history, and geneticist Trevor Jenkins decided to examine the Y chromosome of Lemba males. His interest had been sparked by what he'd heard about Lemba culture.
The musicologist, Margaret Nabarro, told me the Lemba were of Jewish origin.
I think she said that their music showed some signs of Jewish influence.
Yes, she did. And so I went with her to a Lemba cultural festival and collected my samples there.
Astonishingly, Jenkins discovered that the Lemba were indeed of Semitic origin. Subsequent research done by other geneticists showed that a significant proportion of Lemba men had a Y chromosome pattern known as the Cohen modal haplotype, which is characteristic of the Kohanim, the ancient Jewish priestly class. They were effectively a lost Israelite tribe.
It was a vindication. For the Lemba, we always knew that we're Jewish, okay? But it was for those people on the outside that had said we're just making claims. You know, that here is proof that one cannot tamper with. These people are who they say they are.
What was even more surprising about the DNA research was that the Cohen genetic fingerprint was especially strong in one particular Lemba clan, as geneticist Himmler Sudjal explained.
The Lemba identify different clans, and one group that had it at a frequency in excess of 50% was the Buba.
According to Lemba oral tradition, the Buba clan formed the priestly class and were responsible for leading the Lemba out of Israel. Genetics had confirmed that some of the Lemba's ancestors had indeed carried the DNA fingerprint of the Jewish priestly class, the Kohanim. Science had verified that part of their oral history. But could I believe the rest of it? That they'd been led out of Jerusalem by priests at the time of the Babylonian invasion and travelled to Africa via a place called Senna, carrying with them a sacred object called the Ngomolungundu.
Different points in time, from Japan to Holland to Afghanistan, in fact, that have been identified with the lost tribes. And so, as such, we took the view that it wouldn't be sensible to just indiscriminately go out and start genotyping anybody that had some kind of a claim to a Jewish connection. But there was one group in particular that really was quite intriguing, and that's the Lemba from southern Africa. And while they did not consider themselves a lost tribe in a narrow sense, they did consider themselves to have an origin in the ancient Israelite kingdom. And they have a story of dispersal from that part of the world, something like 3,000 years ago, and other aspects to the story. And that part of it is not so distinctive by itself, because there are other groups that have stories like that. But there had been a study done, perhaps 10 or 15 years back now, a bit longer maybe, by a South African geneticist that showed that some of the Y chromosomes in this group, the Lemba, were Semitic, as opposed to Bantu. And that distinction is quite easy to make with genetic markers on the Y chromosome. And that was surprising, because the Lemba look like their Bantu neighbors, and yet they have a lot of Y chromosomes that are Semitic. So that's intriguing, but that doesn't make it a Jewish connection. So with that starting point, we thought, well, might there be some way to see whether the Semitic Y chromosomes that these Lemba carry, whether they might have, in fact, a specifically Jewish origin. So that's what got us started. When you think about Jewish chromosomes as opposed to Semitic chromosomes, that's a hard distinction to make, because we know that that's where Jewish Y chromosomes come from, that part of the world. And so a lot of Y chromosomes, it'd be hard to tell whether they got into the Lemba from specifically a Jewish source, or, for example, from Arab traders or something like that. However, the studies that we had done with the priesthood had identified this one Y chromosomal type, which we called the Cohen modal haplotype, the most common type in the Kohanim. That type is not very common in non-Jewish populations. In fact, it's pretty rare. So if we happen to bump into that type in the Lemba, we could say, hey, it's pretty likely it's a Jewish origin, because it's not too common elsewhere. So that's about all we had to go on, and off we went. And sure enough, when we looked in the Lemba, 10% of them, or a little bit more, had this type, which is primarily found in Jewish populations. And that was a stunner, I have to say. Every so often you do this work and you see something, you say, that's amazing. And that was a stunner. And not only did we see this particular Y chromosomal type that seems characteristic of Jewish populations in the Lemba, but it was clustered in a particular clan within the Lemba called the Buba, and that clan is accorded a leadership role within the Lemba. So it really does sort of seem to fit together with the story that there is some kind of a ancient Jewish origin here, and maybe the Buba who are accorded a leadership role trace more to that origin. And I think that finding that chromosome there doesn't prove that historical case. But if you looked at it and said, well, what do you think is really happening? Your guess is that's what's happening. You don't very often get to do work that results in something that makes you say, wow, that's pretty neat. And when that does happen, you feel pretty lucky. And I do feel a lot of it is, in fact, luck. You start a study, and if it happens to have something in it that's striking, then you find it. And so I think science is maybe 7 or 8 parts luck and one or two parts not making mistakes, because what you have to do is just not get things wrong. But otherwise, it has to be there. And in the case of the Lemba, we got very lucky. There is something really pretty amazing sitting there in the genetic makeup of the Lemba, and we got to see it, and that was really, really exciting.
Produced by Duke University. Online at duke.edu.
I just wanted to come to you to impart some knowledge onto you about who the true biblical Hebrew Israelites are. Bloodline-wise, they are the so-called African Americans.
The wisdom of Solomon in the Apocrypha in the 5th chapter talks about how Jacob, how the heathen is going to be amazed and confounded when they realize that the so-called black man is that chosen line.
Now, if I were to tell you that blacks, for as many centuries as whites have been superior, if you want, in the Western world, that for just as many centuries blacks were superior, you'd probably find that hard to believe. And you'd wonder how such a fact could be hidden. And the answer is, again, collusion. The whites wouldn't want to admit such a thing, because whites like to feel superior and like to think that their superiority is somehow permanent, decreed by God. As for blacks, if you look into the black civilizations that we're going to take a look at momentarily, you find something pretty interesting. You find that those civilizations actually arose as Jewish civilizations, later to become...
From West Africa, they can be taken as slaves to America. Brothers and sisters, blacks of America, it's you. You are the true Hebrews. You are the true Hebrews from the Bible. America gonna do everything, gonna invest as much money as it has, gonna fight as much wars as they can, gonna invite as much weapons as they can just to hide this away from you. Gonna take Israel, gonna bring white people here and to tell you these are the Jews, gonna kill you, gonna kill Arabs, gonna mistreat white people like this guy, just to tell you this lie, that you are nobody and we are the Jews with all the history and so on. It has been deleted, your history, you don't know who you are, don't forget about it. This is why, because America has been taking your history away, never to find out that it's all about you. I'm telling you this, please, I don't ask you to come to Israel and to start a revolution. I'm just asking you to start thinking this way, to believe me a little bit, because I'm living in Israel and I'm part of this injustice. I really believe that people like me and you, we can bring the justice.
Because us the Gentiles, we do need you. We need you to come and pray because you are our Savior. You're the one that was chosen by Yahweh to live in this land, not the Jewish people, it's you. You were stolen from Africa, they deceived you, they told you that you are slaves, but you actually the children of Israel. And it's time just to come back. Come for your people, come back for us, come back for the whole Gentiles, because only you gonna save us. So please come back.
My name is Marie, and I have something that's really, I have to get it out. The Lord is telling me something I need to share. I need you to listen with open ears and an open mind, okay? This is from the Lord. I was watching some clips on what people are calling a hate group, the Hebrew Israelites that were protesting, and while I don't agree with the language and the form of the anger, but they were speaking truth. The Hebrew Israelites, God's chosen people, are what we call African American. So, you know, I was just praying about this, and I was just, you know, just really heartbroken by how they were received and how they were, you know, putting themselves across, you know. And this song comes on. I'm driving to work, and the song comes on the radio. Good, good Father. And the Lord, His Spirit came over me. He said, my children don't know what a good, good Father I am. They haven't experienced how perfect I am. Right now, they are scrambling. They're woken up, and they're scrambling because it says in my word that if you remember my covenant I made with you, then I will remember you. So these people are scrambling, and many of them are very angry. You have no place, none, to be ridiculing them. These are God's children. The Lord said they are scrambling. They're reaching out for me in the best way they know how. How are they going to know how to love when they haven't experienced love in thousands of years? They have been separated from me. They're trying to reach back to me. He said, pray for them. Pray for them. Even if you don't agree that they are Hebrew Israelites, if you are a Christian, claim to be, then pray for them. That's what Jesus says to do. Pray for your enemies. Well, guess what? They're not your enemies. The Hebrew Israelites are the reason why salvation was brought to the world. Through their failure. We, the rest of us, have been grafted in.
We're scared. So what we do? Lock them up, throw them in jail. World's largest prison population of black folks right now. It's right here in this fucking country. Wonder why? We're fucking scared. Even the fucking police officers, the coward police officers that kill unarmed black people are scared. We're scared of that retribution, scared of that black vengeance. And then we project, then we pretend and project that black people are as racist as white people. Who the fuck ever taught a black person black supremacy? The first thing a fucking black person learns is why it's wrong to be a supremacist. They deal with that shit their whole fucking life. Why the fuck would they want them to act supreme? I ain't never heard a black person go around acting superior because of the color of their skin. If anything, they do the opposite. It's white people that are taught. I ain't saying black people can't hate. I ain't saying black people can't be angry. But hell, if they do hate, it's a hate that hate produced. It's a anger that anger produced from white supremacy, a culture and a system of white supremacy. For world, until white people face that greed that they have. Oh, I gotta be on top. I gotta keep my white privilege. Oh God, I'm scared that the black people gonna kill me. They gonna come get me. They gonna snatch me up the way we did them. They gonna do all that dirty shit to me that white people have done to them. Stop being so fucking scared, man. Man up, woman up. We are a white supremacist nation, and we always have been. We have white supremacist institutions, culture, structure, power, psychology, everything, politics. Whitewashing is in everything. The media, education, history is whitewashed and biased. Education is whitewashed and biased. Entertainment is whitewashed and biased.
I grew up with a sense of privilege, a sense of worth. But it took a long time for me to realize that there was a true struggle and a pain in America. This issue that we need to resolve. This black subjugation that is not fair, it is not right, and I wholeheartedly hate it being the underlying awful true nature of our country.
and taught black people are too stupid to take care of themselves, that they need white people to take care of them. And if you look at it, if you think about what it's taken for black people to survive in a dominant white culture that has tried to enslave and murder them and brutalize them since the beginning, I wonder how any white people could proclaim to be able to help black people to survive when they've had to survive since day one.
My word, rednecks. A lot of the rednecks are just, they talk a lot of junk about the Hispanic population.
I was taught that black men are sexual predators. And it turns out that white men, since the founding of our country, systematically rape black women. So there we go. It's just the exact opposite. My ancestors are the ones that stole the land from Native Americans, stole the labor and sweat and blood of black people, and even tore apart families. White people designed the black ghetto, and it's deliberately designed. And although we may look at the image of the ghetto and see a space of blackness, that space was designed by white people. We took over, we stole, and we protected our territory, and once we had stolen it. So we're the original gangbangers, but we look to black people to blame for gangbanger culture.
White supremacy and institutionalized racism guarantee that black people are at the bottom rung of everything. That way you get cheap labor, and there's always a working class that you can count on to do the things that you no longer want to do. If you are a poor black person in New York City, and you live, for example, in the Bronx, there are like 3 cops on every corner now. You can't really go to the store late at night and not be questioned, or looked at, or leered at, or suspected.
You know, they're very nice to me because right off the bat they see that I'm white. And when that came into my awareness, I was like, whoa, it shouldn't be like this. It should not be like this.
What you're going to see. You know what I'm saying? So if you apply yourself, you know what I'm saying, it's documented so much throughout history.
Whatever sector, right. You know what I'm saying? But I grew up an Israelite. Wow. You know what I'm saying? Wow. So my family are Hebrew Israelites, and so I was able to somewhat learn from that growing up. And then it just gravitated me to go to Israel and see what I've been learning firsthand. Wow. So I went there on that.
Like, whatever I feel in my body and my heart, that's just what I am. Like, just growing up, my uncle was a Hebrew Israelite. He passed away. I looked up to him a lot. You know what I'm saying? It just, the little bit I know about it, you know, so I just feel like that's our true religion. You know what I'm saying? Our people are Israelites. That's what I believe. You know what I'm saying? Just.
My ancestors were Igbos from Nigeria, and Igbos are called black Jews. That they're industrious, that they go after things, that they're hard-working people. So all the way back in my DNA, we were self-sufficient.
I love the Israelite community, man. I believe they dope. Got a lot of dope insight, a lot of things that people that's not Israelites can learn from the Israelites. They try to do a lot of study and a lot of research, and not just with what's thrown in front of them. They try to go back as far as possible and try to do as much research as possible, and that's what humans are supposed to do. So I fuck with the Israelites heavy for sure. But if you go back to the original way these scriptures was written, like if the Old Testament, and you look at the original way that the scripture was written, they wasn't calling the higher power the things they calling them now. You know what I'm saying? He had a name. You know what I'm saying? And the name that they used was Yahweh. And the name that they used for the Son of God was Yahweh. So if you look in the original scriptures, then that's what you will find. But yeah, I mean, people just got to do their research, man. And then the people that do their research got to continue to spread information and document it so that the next generation and the next generation and future generations could just be in a better predicament. Because when me and you was born, we was born.
To Negro Latinos and everything. Hey, what's up, cat? Hey, wait, slow down, cat.
Come here. I see you talking about him all the time.
I know you record. We know he not black.
Hey, look here. You know you an Israelite?
Been knowing that.
You been knowing you an Israelite? Hey, stay strong. Hey, NBA young boy. Hey, come holler at me, bro. Hey, you believe in the Bible, man? Huh? You believe in the Bible, bro? Hey, no, you an Israelite. You gotta repent. You the chosen. You the chosen of the Bible, bro. Right? Hey, repent and be converted, man. Alright? Or the Lord gonna bring a judgment on you. Alright? Know that. The Lord might put you to death, so you better repent. Alright?
Hey, Blake Griffin. No, you're an Israelite. Is that Blake? Hey, Blake Griffin. No, you're an Israelite, man. You're a Levite, man. You're a Haitian.
That's right.
Hey, you're an Israelite. Hey. Blake, you know it, man. Hey, Blake. Hey, repent. You done been. I see you walk past the camp before. Hey, repent, Blake. See, that's the show. You see that?
I want to read a couple verses for you right now. All right, King?
Show him his nationality, man. Show him who he is, huh?
You know, according to the scriptures, right, the so-called black man is from the tribe of Judah.
Right.
The so-called black man is from the tribe of Judah.
Right.
The so-called black man is from the tribe of Judah.
Right.
The so-called black man is from the tribe of Judah.
Right.
Right? Yeah. And we want to bring out two scriptures for you if you got the time, King.
Yeah, of course. I always got time for scriptures. Oh, yeah.
Now, if you don't know, you're from the tribe of Judah. From the nation of Israel. That's your nationality. You're not a black American. You're not African American. You're not an Afro-American. You don't even got an Afro. You understand? That's a right. You know? So we are the children of Israel, man. And we got right now, as America's falling, we're rising as a people. You understand? Before, back in the 90s, it wasn't cool to be an Israelite. Now, this thing is spreading worldwide. All you gotta do is Google Hebrew Israelites. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. All you gotta do is Google Hebrew Israelites, man. So, hopefully you got edified. If you have any questions, I'm willing to answer it. You know what I mean? But, I got your man. You know, so, and I'll definitely hit you up with what's going on.
Yeah, I'll be here for a few more days, man.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, come.
You don't realize how much you need something until you actually get it.
That's right. Right.
How was I walking around without that?
Right.
How was everything all right without that?
So, this is your identity. This is what we giving back to the people. And this is free. We're not charging people like Creflo Dollar, like TV snakes. You understand? We not out here for that. We out here in the ghettos and the slums to wake up our people. You understand? Prophets on the corner.
This is finding out who we really are. Broke them just 12 tribes of Judah. Broke them just 12 tribes of Judah. Y'all AI, I'm Haitian. Y'all AI, I'm Haitian. We're leaving Babylon. I'm going back to Zion. Leaving Babylon, yo. Going back to Zion. Yeah, we are. Oh, Jaja, oh, Jaja, oh, Jaja, oh, Jaja. Yeah.
Stevie Wonder!
Although they attracted star supporters like Stevie Wonder, the community remained in official limbo for decades.
I love you. I am here because I really care.
This goes out to those that choose to use disrespectful views for original Jews. The chosen people of God get slandered and abused in the streets and the news by the season that blue. The synagogues and Satan want to keep us confused. That's how we lose. Got the ill street blues. From Chirac to England, me and Common dropping bombs like the baby pain. Let's be stabbed in the cancer. We do this for.
Wish all my people wake up. Why we be acting so ignorant? Know we can read, know we can write, so why we be acting illiterate? Like we can't read in between the lines. I promise you, I just can't riddle it. Instead of us sticking together, we killing each other and acting like idiot. Hold up, we the one making the least of the money, but mainly the one that's spending it. $1.25 trillion, but who do you think get the benefits? Ain't got no problem with no other race, but we gotta support our own businesses. Spend all the money with people who hate us, but towards each other we envious.
Influenced by the Hebrew Israelites. I'm an Israelite. Don't call me black no more. That word is only a color. It ain't facts no more. I don't wear crosses no more.
Yahshua was coming back. I ain't scared of losses no more. I see life in that.
I'm an Israelite, my diamonds Israelites.
You're probably wondering, what? Black Israelites? Yeah, but it's not what you think. In a deeply reported article on Genius by writer Sam Kestenbaum, we see how small spiritual movement is influencing the bars of some of your favorite artists. Kendrick Lamar's Damn, the song Fear should have come to mind. In a voicemail that opens the song, Kendrick's cousin Carl Duckworth, known in the Hebrew Israelite community as Carney Ben Israel, is heard discussing that same chapter.
Deuteronomy 28 and 28 says, the Lord shall smite thee with madness and blindness and astonishment of heart.
Kendrick was supposedly blown away by this verse during study sessions with his cousin Duckworth. Kestenbaum writes, quote, Hebrew Israelites point to the chapter of Deuteronomy 28, in particular a passage that describes how the biblical Israelites will be sent back in ships to Egypt for their disobedience to God, as a prophetic foretelling of the enslavement of African people in the Americas.
Say who I am, biblically, like spiritually, the true Israelite, I'm not sure if change is ever going to come on that end. So now my thing is I'm pleading that change will come amongst us, amongst God's chosen one. I had somebody come up on my page the other day and was like, and I never read my comments, but since all this has been going on, you know, I kind of read because sometimes I have other celebrities or other people hit me in DMs and stuff I normally don't check to ask me to be a part of stuff or just checking up on me and we're checking up on each other. And so I saw the person say, you know, we're all God's children. And yeah, we are. But he has his 12 tribe, his chosen one, and I know who I am. But he has his 12 tribe, his chosen one, and I know who I am. But he has his 12 tribe, his chosen one, and I know who I am. And that's what I was talking about. And so in order to know what I was talking about, you got to study that, to show that stuff. You got to study. We got to get in the book. We cannot depend on the law of the land. We cannot depend on the government. We cannot depend on certain things. We got to depend on the book. What's the book? That's the word. That's the Bible.
A lot of people don't want to have those type of conversations, and those are the conversations we need to have. Again, I said it on my last week that we all won. Dominicans, Jamaicans, Puerto Ricans, we all won. It was just a different stop that we had on the boat. My stop and my people's stop was in Puerto Rico. Somebody else's stop was in DR. Somebody else's spot was in Jamaica. At the end of the day, we don't want to have these conversations. This is the curriculum that needs to be in the school system. You know why they don't want to hear it? Because they uncomfortable talking about it. At the end of the day, we have to continue to. You guys want to have this conversation with me? Let's have this conversation. Let's talk about it. We can talk about the 12 tribes of Israel, who's the chosen people. Let's talk about it. We can talk about the original man. I'm ready to talk about this all day.
Totally bigger mission going on. Now, for as my beliefs in being an Israelite, I don't know how many people are familiar with the 12 tribes of Israel, but Judah happens to be one of the leading tribes, and the so-called African American or Negro from the Americas or from the tribe of Judah. And so that's what I'm representing, and being a representative for all the black people around the world as a reputation for Judah and the other 11 tribes of Israel. Now do your research. You can do your research and, look it up and find out the truth for yourself. I'm not going to sit up here and explain everything.
They say you Hebrew, you ain't Haitian. What happened? They say you Hebrew, you ain't Haitian. I'm Hebrew Israelite. I'm Jewish and I'm Jewish. I'm a real Jew. Like I ain't convert. I was born this. And my bar mitzvah coming soon. And you invited.
And we original man and woman anyway.
That part.
Yeah.
That part.
Yeah.
And when you do your real true research about the Hebrews and the Jews and the Israelites and all that, you find out that they look a lot like us sitting in this room right now.
Yeah.
And when you do your real true research about the Hebrews and the Jews and the Israelites and all that, you find out that they look a lot like us sitting in this room right now. So maybe somebody stole some of the Jewish religion. Anyway, let me shut up. I don't have to be like some people stole from the get-go, but
Then you got all these facets of denominations and races coming together.
At the end of the day, everybody human, right?
Oh, yeah.
And if we go by the ideology of what America was based off of, it's supposed to be one nation under God.
Yeah,
and
under
you're free to
America.
worship whoever you want, whatever God you choose. So I feel like personally, I know what I am. I'm stand for what I am.
So what are you according to the Bible? You're an Israelite, right? Clap it up for the sisters.
My father's from Eritrea. I know what I am. And I'm a representative of what I am. But at the same time, I am in another nation.
Right.
I'm not in my indigenous nation.
No, I understand. And you got and you moving
I don't want to see nobody that look like me because if you use my voice to do so, you must lose me. So I'm going to use it.
Right. All right. So we appreciate y'all and we love y'all.
Definitely.
For 400 years, you had your knees on her neck, a garden of evil with no seeds of respect. In America's mirror, all she sees is regret. Instead of letting blood live, they begging for bloodlet.
The Bible, it said 400 years it said people would be in a country that you would be strangers in for 400 years, and this is 401. 1619. That's when slavery started, 1619. So here we are in 2020, and all this going on. I happen to be like, I feel like this is ordained, you know what I mean? I think it's the fulfillment of a prophecy. And everybody's saying, we're at war and we're unprepared. We don't have the ammunition. We don't have the preparation. We don't have the strategy. We don't have the leadership. We don't have the, hey, bruh, God only gonna fight with one of us. God will only fight with one side of this. And if if he fight with us, and guess what? That's all the we need.
Man, shalom, Israel. My name is Ratazan Sharyan, representation of Christ and all saying. And we have a very special guest here with us today. How you doing, my brother?
I'm good. How you doing?
Man, I'm good, man. It's a pleasure to have you here, man. We have Freeway Ricky Ross, the real deal. We ain't dealing with no phonies, right?
No doubt, no doubt.
And it's a pleasure to have you, man, and especially to actually sit down and dialogue with the Hebrew Israelites, because you done many interviews and things like that, man, and a lot of people try to talk to you, but just to sit down with the Hebrews is a big thing because we actually represent for our people, and we out here on these streets daily, out here in the communities trying to tell our people the truth about this system and this government.
Right.
And a lot of times we get a lot of flack on it because people don't want to hear this word, you know what I'm saying? People don't want to hear us speaking because they love this system, but we just want to shed some light on the system and
I know you don't really fuck with people. I know you don't really do these podcasts and shit like that, but I need you. And he said, Joe, I really don't. But for you, my brother, I'll do it. And I'm beyond honored. But when I was speaking to you, you told me, yo, Joe, I'm Jewish now. But how do you break that down to me, G?
Well, I didn't say Jewish, Joe.
I'm sorry, I don't know.
I just said I'll come to the realization, saying some years back, that who we call African Americans here in this country is the descendants of the biblical Hebrew Israelites. You know what I'm saying? I know the boy Nick Cannon caught a lot of flack for saying it, because he's on a tremendous platform.
Who's
you know what I'm saying? Nick Cannon.
Oh, Nick Cannon said that, and then that was the controversy.
Yeah, because he mentioned that the original Hebrew Israelites was people of color. You feel me?
And so.
But it's not just him saying that. You know, if you study, you read certain history books.